Lauren, why do we struggle to bounce back emotionally after falling in life?
A few different reasons, and I think it's case by case. What helps us bounce back? It depends on how strong we are mentally, how strong we are physically, the set of routines and skills we have in place to handle adversity, how strong are our coping skills. So I don't think you can really say overarching, this is what helps, or this is why I was able to bounce back. But I think if you look at each individual, and you look at their daily routine, you look at the structures they have in place to handle adversity and the coping skills they have for when adversity hits, that'll be a really good determining factor in how they're able to bounce back.
Yeah, I can see. To me, I felt, or I'm always feeling that it's, every person is different. Everyone has a different background. Everyone has a different upbringings, and we see the world in a different way. And you have a very inspiring story how you had to overcome some really setbacks in your life, and that either forces you to just push through and overcome them both mentally and emotionally, or those can break you. And I feel that when it comes to a lot of setbacks, whether it's, again, it could be from a heartbreak, from a medical crisis, or loss of a loved one or job, it tends to overwhelm us. And on an emotional level, how can people, or at least in your case, what was your way to overcome those and push through and really move on and move forward, especially on an emotional level?
I really enjoy this quote, and I can't remember who exactly it's from, but it says, "Pain is inevitable, but suffering is a choice." And I want to pause and just like let that sink in. Suffering is a choice. So many of us are attached to our suffering or attached to the pain because it almost validates us continuing to play the victim role. If people are saying, "I'm so sorry for what happened to you, this must be really difficult for you," it validates you not moving beyond that experience. And so often people stay attached to it and they don't work on overcoming the difficulties in their lives and they stay stuck in them. But what I believe is that it's a choice. Suffering is a choice. You can feel the pain and you can choose to move forward, or you can feel it and you can choose to stay stuck. And so for me, for example, coming out of a coma with a traumatic brain injury, doctors' limiting beliefs, I said, that's not going to be my story after going through this horse accident. I said, I'm going to make it through this because I want to be a victor and not a victim. And so I think everyone has that choice, no matter what you've gone through, whatever you've gone through, it means something different to each person. No two people will go through the same experience and have the same result or feeling about it. And so you don't need to compare, oh, I've been through this or they've been through that. It means something individual to you, and it's your choice on whether you want to let that experience define who you are and keep you stuck, or if you want to learn from that experience and continue to evolve and learn and grow from it and turn it around and help others.
First of all, I love that quote, and it's funny. I don't know where I heard that quote before or read it before, but when I was going through some level of pain, I had that quote in my mind, and I was just like, I don't know where it came from, but I'm using as my mantra. I just changed it a bit. Instead of being putting a choice, I said optional. That suffering is optional. But one of the things that impresses me the most about your story is like at a very young age, you decided that no, I'm not gonna fall victim of my accident, even though the doctors might say this, even though my parents might say this, or my friends are saying this. I have a different mindset. Do you think that you were born with that mindset, or were things that happened in your life prior to the accident that shape your mindset that
Yeah,
way?
I think it's a little bit of both. I think it has to do with the individual I was, who I was at birth. It then had to do with the upbringing that I had with my parents. They were both big supporters. I had a secure attachment, which, this is how we I believe, come to form our sense of identity is the attachment styles we actually have with our primary caregivers. It's how we're able to form attachments with other individuals in our lives. And so having parents who are loving, supportive, and encourage me to follow my dreams helped me become a more secure and confident individual and resilient individual, because I was confident to go out and take risks as a child. And so I started riding horses when I was 6 years old, and I was competing. And so I was trained as an athlete from a very young age. So I had developed the mindset of what it took to be a winner, to be a champion, to go after my dreams, to fall, to get back up. And so when this event happened, it wasn't that I had per se been prepared for something like this, but I was able to say, get back up, dust your shoulders off, and keep going.
I can see how, obviously, the way that you, especially our types of attachment that is completely outside of control, even outside of our awareness, even late in life. We don't know exactly how, if we're secure, if we're anxious, if we're avoiding, if we're any of this. And even though, obviously, it's still big credit to you for adopting that mindset, even though part of it was nature and part of it was nurture, obviously. But having that strong will that nothing is going to break me, and any setback I'm just going to push through, is something that it feels like we are lacking more and more in today's society. Feels like, I don't know exactly why, but a lot of challenges can either make or break people. It seems to me, though, that most people are being broken by challenges in life. What do you think that this is happening? And if accurate, because I don't know how accurate this assessment is, what can people do that are not aware of what's happening to them to just switch and flip that mindset?
I absolutely love this question. And it's spot on with where I'm at in my life right now, because I'm currently studying for a master's in psychology. I graduate in a couple of months, and I'm working on a grant proposal project in school for a program that I believe is missing from the general education system. We aren't taught mindset principles, personal development principles, coping strategies in high school. Asking the listeners, was anyone assigned a personal development book in high school?
Nope.
You're taught how to dissect a frog, but you're not taught mindset strategies or skills or personal development strategies or skills. And so then we think when we graduate from high school or college, we'll be an adult and we'll know how things operate and we'll know how to do everything, will make sense. And that's simply not the case. And what I see happening time and time and time again is individuals enter the real world and adversity hits and they have no idea how to handle it. And it's a downward spiral in which many never make it back up from. And they don't have this general awareness or understanding of what's actually going on and how they can elevate their being, go in, do the inner work, and make it beyond this and grow and become a wiser, stronger, more connected individual beyond that, because it's so overwhelming because they aren't taught the coping skills to make it through that. So I'm faulting the education system in this, is that we aren't taught how to properly handle adversity when we are younger.
And what would be the first step for somebody, let's say that they're in their 20s, 30s, or even
Mhm.
40s,
Yeah.
that are facing adversity, that have faced adversity in the past, not being able to either, as you said, cope or to overcome that? What would it be if they decided to say, hey, enough is enough? I need to change my life, change my mindset. What would be for them the first step to take?
So oftentimes, what becomes so overpowering is our thought patterns. And we aren't taught how to train our minds, and we aren't taught how to observe our thoughts. We aren't taught how to reprogram our subconscious mind. So, one of the first steps I would take would be to look at how you're thinking about what's going on and to realize you have more control over that than you realize. And so different ways you can start to reprogram your subconscious mind or change the way that you're thinking so that it works for you as opposed to against you is being aware of your thoughts, looking at your thoughts and saying, is this how I want to be thinking? And if not, what thoughts would I like to be having instead? It's called cognitive restructuring. Another method would be repeating positive affirmations. So positive I am statements about yourself. I am love, I'm successful, I'm healthy, I'm capable, and kind of build yourself up. And Daniel, all of this roots back to really building a strong relationship with yourself. And that's something I think a lot of people are lacking is they're not taking care of this human, which is our main responsibility on this planet, is to take care of ourselves so that we can show up for and take care of others. And so I think to take a moment and be like, am I getting enough sleep at night? Am I eating well? Am I improving my thought processes by reading, by mindset training? Am I moving my body for 30 minutes a day? There's so many things we could get into here, but at like a foundational level, relationship to self and being aware of our thought processes.
I can definitely relate with the positive affirmations or the lack of them, right? Because we as humans, we are almost wired to have more negative thoughts. It's what kept us alive for so long. It's how we evolved, all of that. And it's so easy to tap into them, and it's like 70% of our thoughts are probably negative and and they are repetitive. But one thing that I tried to implement into my life was to have more positive affirmation. Just start, as you said, you're loved and you're enough and you're successful and you're worthy and all these kind of things. But it takes quite some time until you change. Not only, I mean, you can think about it, but the biggest issue is actually feeling it. And to change that feeling, as you said, on a subconscious level from the body is one of the hardest thing. And I think it happened to me, definitely. And I'm pretty sure that happens to a lot of people. It's like when you try it a week, when you try it a month, and then like nothing is working, it's like, okay, you go back to the old habits. How to resist going back to the old habits and how to stick to it and trusting the process that eventually your body will catch up with your mind.
You know what we love in this day and age, Daniel? Quick fixes, instant
Yeah.
gratification, overnight success. But in reality, that's not how this works. And you have to be committed to the long game. And so it's really important for you to define and create a clear vision for what you want for yourself and your future, not just what you want tomorrow, but where you're going. And you have to be committed to who you want to be in 1 year, 3 years, 5 years. And so one thing as a coach that I work with a lot of my clients on is like, we want to design your life, but we need to create a plan and have a clear vision for where you want to go. And I think it's something a lot of people struggle with is they have all these like dreams and goals, but like they're not super clear on the vision. They're not super detailed on the vision of like, here's exactly what I want. And here's the path that I think that's going to help me get there. And one of the best things that I know that'll help you get there, because you need to become the person who's capable of achieving whatever goal, dream, aspiration you have, is taking care of yourself and building a strong relationship with you. And that's a daily practice.
And how clear should that vision be? Because that's something that I struggle with. I have, yeah, dreams and goals, but they are, I'm not going to say that they're not very clear or they're not very specific, but they're kind of broad. How defined should be those goals and dreams and visions so we can actually aim for them and have like a better shot at achieving them?
I would say the clearer the better, because here's what I believe happens when you get crystal clear and you can sit, for example, I sit in my meditation every morning. I have my vision board above my bed. I sit in my meditation when I wake up and I'm visualizing all of the events, experiences, etc. that I want to be having, that I plan to have and create in my mind. And so the clearer you are, what I believe will start to happen is you're programming your subconscious mind for the future that you want for yourself. And as you enter the world, as you have your calls, your meetings, you go on experiencing life, you'll start to notice these people, places, and things happening around you because you have already programmed your mind for what you want. if you haven't programmed it, if you haven't been clear, it's not going to notice as many things that are already going on around you that are in line with where you want to be going.
It's almost like where you put your focus, your energy goes, kind of like that.
Exactly. Exactly. So the more detailed you can be, the better, because then you can start to tap into the emotions of how will I feel when I get that specific thing? What will it look like? What will it feel like? What will it taste like? And then as you're defining that specifically, you're already on the path to whatever that thing is.
So now that you coach several clients and you see exactly how they live their lives and how they think and to some extent how they see the world, what is the most common trend that holds them back? What is exactly that thing that you see very often? It's like, okay, that is what's holding her, or what is that's holding him back.
Mhm. Three things. Two we've touched on. Uh, so limiting beliefs about oneself, which is very similar to lack of a foundational relationship to self. So, and then the third one would be lack of accountability. And that's one that we should get into, because so often individuals like to play the victim role. I've been there before. I think that I've outgrown that now, and I'll catch myself at times blaming other people, experiences, events for their well-being or for their emotional state or for their being stuck or down or what have you, as opposed to saying, this is on me, this is my reality because of something that I chose, and I'm going to own that, because that's going to give me the freedom and the power to move beyond it and inspire positive change in my life.
The accountability part, I can definitely see it. It's just it's like it's one of those life lies that is easier for us to keep.
Mm-hmm.
That I'm not successful because, well, look at my background, or look at the economy, or
Right.
whatever, or just people hate me or don't like me, or any of those kind of things, because you're giving your power away to outside factors, which again, I don't know how effective that is in the long run for you. Clearly, it's not. But I think people are having a hard time seeing that, which is attached to the limiting belief that they have. And in my mind, that's one of the hardest things to become aware and to change those stories we have in our heads, or that our brain created when we were kids, and we experienced life in a way that, to us, many of those stories, we don't see them as a story, we see them as a reality. We see them as we see, it's hard to challenge something that in your head is common sense and it happens everywhere. How do somebody can become more aware and just go down and dig deep into their brain, to the stories, to realize that that thing that used to be, oh, this is reality, now I know, just a story I had in my head.
Mhm. I think you really need to go back to your childhood, and you need to look at, hey, did I have a mother, a father, a brother, a sister, a cousin, a friend telling me I wasn't enough, telling me that I couldn't, telling me I would never be anything? And to start to understand that a big part of the reason of who we are today can be understood by the relationship that we had with our primary caregivers, and that helps shape our identity. And so if you find yourself as someone who has a victim mindset or who is more timid or reserved, it's very possible that this was how you were shaped and talked to and taught when you were little, and that came to form your identity, and you've carried that with you into adulthood, and you've never challenged your thoughts. You've never challenged your thought process, and you can start to say, hey, wait a minute, why do I believe this thought that keeps repeating? Is this valid? What can I do to prove this? And then if you're starting to find like, this isn't valid, I'm starting to realize this is all from past relationships that were unhealthy or toxic, my upbringing, certain events that weren't great events that happened in my life that don't need to define me. They were just part of my learning and growing, but I need to maybe check in with myself into how I've let these affect me and continue to be present in my day-to-day life, and start to check that and come to understand and kind of deconstruct your thought processes and why they're happening, and then start to rebuild with some more positive thought processes.
I think one of the, at least to me, one of the hardest thing of challenging a story is, at least in my case, I guess I haven't gone through all of the stories in my head, but the majority of them, there is some truth behind that story, in a sense. Like, I can give you an example. I used to suffer a lot from social anxiety, that I always felt like like an outsider, that I couldn't fit in, that I didn't belong. I felt rejected when I was growing up. Also, I was bullied. But and the story around my head was, if once people really get to know me, they won't like me because I'm lame, I'm not enough, and all the stories, all the negative things we tell ourselves. Now, that story is partially true because we're humans. There are going to be people out there, they're not going to be my friends, or they're not going to see me as somebody who's exciting or just interesting or fascinating. But at the same time, there are going to be people that are going to see me as a true friend or somebody that they like to hang out with. And I feel it's like, the where you put your attention is like, is me not being liked by people the rule, and people who like me is exception, or the other way around, is people who like me the rule and people who don't is exception. So it's just, you always, well, your brain will always find evidence about what it believes in, clearly. So if you change that approach, but sometimes it's hard because, as you say, your identity, you're so attached to that identity that you still see, well, but that is true still, yeah, but the opposite as well.
Yes, it's so true. It's like you can find whatever you're looking for. And it's like a Google search. You could search two opposing things and you could maybe find answers for each. Who do you want to let dictate what you believe about yourself? Someone who doesn't know you very well, or you who's been inside your body for me now, it's 31 years. I think I know myself pretty well and better than most people do know me. So I'm confident that my intentions are good. My the path that I'm on and my daily routines, I'm confident that those are healthy and that I'm showing up in my effort to the best of my ability. And so to stem my confidence from that and from my intentions, as opposed to what someone who barely knows me may think.
Yeah, and the very weird and interesting part about that is, like, if you think about it, just like, as we mentioned, everyone sees the world in a different way. So there are probably thousands of versions of yourself based on how people perceive you. It's like,
Yes.
nobody's going to see you. I see you in one way, and nobody else is going to see you the way that I see you, just like the way that your parents see you. It's like it's almost like, okay, if everyone sees me in a different way anyway, might as well just
Right.
go with my own.
And that's the thing. I think we spend so much time trying to seek approval of others when instead, like, let's focus on being the most of us that we can possibly be, because I believe that, like, we are here to fully express ourselves and go after our dream. And, like, for me, it's been like tunnel vision on that. And that has been the most rewarding and gratifying process, because I feel whole in who I am. I'm not seeking validation from others. I'm just pursuing what I feel I've been called to do on this planet.
Now, if that in I know that some people are looking for validation, and that is, I understand where that comes from. Some people are looking for connection and appreciation, and when you don't have that, then you either go down the rabbit hole of just being a people pleaser, or you feel that nobody likes you, right? And you feel that you need to change because what you're seeking, I think, overall we're seeking that connection. And when we don't want when we cannot connect with those people we want to connect with, that's where our confidence shatters to some extent. What can we do to just be more accepting this in a better way, especially because, again, it's not that I'm trying to feel good about myself based on what you think about me. It's just, I want to connect. We are social species, and when we struggle, then our minds can go to a very dark place.
Of course. And I think I love this quote, is like, what you seek is seeking you. And so, like, if you're seeking connection, if you're seeking community, like, you will find that, but I don't think the right approach is let me be this way so that one specific person will like and approve of me. Instead, let me be a full expression of myself and show up as I feel called to. And the right people, I will then draw the right people in because I'm being a full expression of who I am. And I want to be surrounded by the people who can love and support that version of me, as opposed to someone who may like this fake version of me that I'm trying to be because I think they'll like it. Because that's not who you really are.
Yeah, that can be very scary actually, just to be like a full version of yourself. And Joe Dispenza talks about the gap between who you are by yourself and who you show up to other people. And that gap is like, the wider the gap, the more unhappy you are, because it's always scary to, even if we say that we shouldn't, that we need to show up as our true self, th- there's always that part of us like, well, what if the true version of myself nobody likes, and it gets embarrassed. I think that it's one of the hardest things for people to really trust that they can find mind like people.
I have a question for you.
Uh-huh.
What would it feel like to spend your whole life feeling like you never expressed the full version of who you really were?
Exhausting. It would be one. It would be exhausting, and I guess it would be sad, because again, you you were playing a role, which by the way, some people are happy with playing the role, and fine, with them. But I think mostly would be just sadness, and I think that you would struggle with mental health. You would fall into depression because you feel that you cannot be your authentic self.
But it's often the view people have is, wow, that's scary, or that would be hard to like just be me. But to me, like, how sad to have lived a whole life pretending to be someone else to try and be liked, as opposed to just being here and being you. Because I believe that's why we're really here. And I believe that when you can become in alignment with that, and you can do something you're scared of every day, and you can start to express who you really are, that's when the magic happens. And that's when you become unstoppable, and that's when you start to attract everything that you really want in life, is by just being you. And it's become this whole concept that we're trying to put on a mask. We're editing our photos. We're doing things to try and get these certain people to like us. And it's like, it just seems all sideways to me.
It does. I mean, you're right. It's just, I can definitely see your point. I can see from the angle of somebody who is scared, because at the end of the day, being our true self in front of other people is highly unfamiliar. We cannot predict how they're going to react. We can predict how they're going to react the way, if we, I wouldn't say we fully pretend to be somebody else, but we mask some of the things that we might be embarrassed of. So I definitely see the point, and it, it all has to come down of loving yourself. But that is a sort of hard definition to grasp. Even if you ask people what's love, everyone has a different definition of the word. Now, what would be, how would loving yourself be like, and what would be the process to accept every single aspect of you?
Mhm. I like to start with this question for individuals who maybe don't have the ability to look in the mirror and look at yourself in the eyes and say, "I love you. Thank you for showing up today. We've been through a lot together." Like, whoa, you know what I mean?
Hmm.
Thank you. What can I do for you today? Like, literally having this conversation with yourself in the morning. For people who don't have that connection, the starting point is, what is stopping you from loving yourself?
I think the only thing would be, it's funny. I think obviously the negative thoughts and the experience and the traumas you have from the past. Everyone has traumas. Everyone has a negative experience that we experienced in childhood, and I think that that's one of the things that is preventing us from loving ourselves. But one of the, I had this realization when I was at the gym the other day after a workout, or in between sets. I was looking at what everyone else was doing, and you see a lot of people looking at themselves in the mirror. And to me, it's like, you know what? we can be so in love with ourselves and yet hate ourselves so much. It's such a contradicting thing. And it's like, how can we have both? And in a
Mm,
way, but then we trust more the
mm,
part that hates
mm.
ourselves.
I do think we also are our biggest critic, for sure. No one is as hard as us. It's very rare you'll find someone harder on you than you are on yourself. And so I think to realize that, but to realize that another quote that I love is um, you can only love another person as deeply as you have like love and met yourself. And so to realize that by like forming when you form a relationship with yourself and you go in and you do that inner work and you develop this loving, compassionate bond with you and you take really good care of yourself, everything else in your life will start to change. So this answer lies in the work you're avoiding. It's the dedication to be better than you were yesterday and not to compare yourself to others, but just to be on this journey of continuously improving yourself and seeking the things that you feel called to. And I think it can be a really beautiful process and journey. And so, for anyone who feels lost or stuck or who feels like I don't have a relationship to myself, it's just starting to question what's stopping me from going in? What's stopping me from loving myself? Why can't I love myself? And to start doing just something small, whether it's taking yourself on a walk, like observing your thoughts, saying some positive affirmations. It doesn't have to be this huge thing in the beginning, but you'll start to notice everything shift when you start to take better care of and form a relationship to yourself.
I think what stops most people would be courage. And I'm not saying that they're not courageous, because to me, if you're doing something, even if you're afraid of doing it and you do it, I mean, that's courage. You cannot fake courage. But I think the courage, in a sense, that when you try to start changing, or at least from be more positive to yourself, or even changing a little bit your identity, just instead of being a victim as you used to be, now you are more into, you know, open your world of possibilities, like you're more abundant and things like that, and everything is on your control. You can do it from a intellectual standpoint, from your conscious mind. One thing that I experience is that when your body has been conditioned to feel a certain way for 20, 30 years, right? Even it's many times your body will just wants to go back to what is familiar, what it feels home. And as we go back to the very first question that you said, that people can be addicted to suffering, I definitely can relate to that, because for years I was addicted to a type of suffering. Not that I felt like victim, but the feeling of unworthiness, or the feeling of sadness or hopelessness. It's just, even though my mind was trying to switch and just go into a more positive, my body was just kept going back, and it was this back and forth, that if you're not aware enough, your body will always win. And I think, I don't know if your clients that you coach have experienced that, and if so, how have you helped them navigate those and just get their body in line with their mind?
Yeah, I mean, I think, what I see is so many of us are walking around on autopilot. We're regretting the future, we're regretting the past, we're fearing the future, and we're just stuck because it's familiar, it's comfortable, and it's all we've ever known. And we don't realize that we can like push beyond that, and that unknown is uncomfortable because what is going to happen when you level up, when your life changes? Not sure because I haven't, maybe I haven't been there yet. I'm familiar with this like comfortable way I've been living with how my past has gone, and I've just continued in this victim mindset of being stuck and having these limited beliefs. What happens when I go beyond that? And that can be really scary to a lot of people. But it's why they're in the coaching room, it's why they're in the therapy room, is because they want something different. But you can also lead a horse to water and not make it drink. So it really ultimately comes to how many times do you want to tell me and tell yourself this same story on repeat? Or do you want to move beyond it and create a better future for yourself? You can't make someone change. That's an internal job. That's an inside job. You can give them all the skills, you can talk them through it. But it's part of the process of changing, is why you're in a coaching room, why you're in a therapy room, why we're on these podcasts, learning, growing, evolving, is because we want to become more and we want to help others do the same.
Yeah. I mean, you cannot literally, you cannot force anybody to change. It's just, it has to come from them. And I think that a lot of people, including myself, at least at my point when I decided to change, was when you face like a huge life adversity, when something, when you get knocked down, when your life turns, upside down, and then it's like, okay, there's something I need to change. But in those times, and again, going back to falling in life, as when we mentioned, it could be an accident as you had one, or just, or even somebody, I lost a loved one, or a breakup, a divorce, losing a job. These unexpected events can take people into a very dark place before they decide to change. It's almost like natural. How can we not lose ourselves in such a dark place, and how can we pull ourselves out of it?
Mhm. It's so true, and I love this part of the conversation because it is often these moments like, why do we have to be brought to our knees to like completely transform? Why couldn't we be in this like this growing, evolving process to this extreme in advance of being completely shaken up? And I had this woman, Natalie Susie, who's a professor at UCSD, and she taught a class called The Pursuit of Happiness. And she used to reference these moments that we're speaking of where you're brought to your knees as a ditch moment, but then she started calling them cocoon moments, which I thought was so beautiful. Like when you are completely knocked down, shaken up, brought to your knees, that's a cocoon moment. And so to envision yourself in that moment, you are a caterpillar in a cocoon and kind of like a rebirth, and you're growing your wings, and you can't rush this process. And this is a lot of what I talk about in my TEDx talk. It's this space between falling and getting back up, and that is the space of transformation. And so many of us try and rush that space because it's the uncomfortable growth space. And you can't rush a butterfly when it grows its wings. The same as you can't rush someone when they're healing, or when they're really like starting to love themselves or care for themselves after being brought to their knees. This is a really special time, and it's the period of transformation. And so many of us try and run from it because it's really uncomfortable. We go through a breakup, we immediately start seeing someone else because we don't want to feel the pain of being alone. We lose a job, we start drinking and numb ourselves because we don't want to deal with the reality of being jobless. And that moment, those most difficult moments, are really the opportunity to dive in and commit to beginning again and rebuilding yourself.
Yeah, I love that. It's just because I don't think that I've been trying to think for a while if we can change without having to be brought to our knees. And I don't know if we would have enough motivation to actually change, right? Because our lives, something needs to happen so dramatically or so drastically that's like, okay, things need to change. But one thing that I've noticed about people, and I think this mostly happens with, I think when people break up, you always hear people saying, or you just even going through divorce, people saying that they're all working on themselves. And that's a very common trend. But then you think about it, are you really working on yourself emotionally, or are you waiting, or are you letting time to numb the pain away? Because a lot of people say, time is a healer. Time just numbs the pain. So your emotional wound still is still open, right? So how can people work in any aspect of your life, any adversity, on those emotional wounds that those have no timeline? Because if you hurt yourself physically, you have a timeline that how long it takes
Right.
to heal those, but those emotional wounds can take a month, or it can take like 5 years.
Yeah.
How can people navigate those waters?
It's interesting. It's a case by case basis. And I'll give an example. Like I went through a breakup that completely broke my heart, and it took me a year before I was even, and I took a year to myself, and that was how much time I needed. For some people that's 2 months, 3 months, 6 months, but you have to understand that it's individual to you, and that to believe that like you will feel okay again, and that you need this time and to devote that time for you, because if you don't, take that time when you've been brought to your knees for whatever reason and you're really hurting and you're wounded, and you don't work through it and understand it and like grow from it, it's going to keep presenting itself in each following situation. It's going to keep coming up. And so to understand the importance of really healing and working on yourself and becoming a whole person before entering that situation again, I think is so important. And regarding your question of can we heal and transform when we're not just brought to our knees? One of my favorite scientists and doctors who you've mentioned, Dr. Joe Dispenza, he is brilliant, and he was hit by a car, had a spinal cord injury. They told him he wouldn't be able to walk again. He claims he taught himself to walk again from reprogramming his subconscious mind and through his mindset and belief system. So I think when we have these different mentors and coaches, authors, speakers, what have you, podcasters who can give examples of what they've been through, and this goes back to vulnerability and being you and being comfortable sharing what you've been through, because if you don't share it, you may not know like who else has gone through something similar that may be able to help you. And so when you share, I think that is what breeds genuine connection. And so Joe Dispenza, I started watching his show Rewired on Gaia Network, and he goes into how we think on average, what is it, 60,000 thoughts a day?
Probably.
90% of which are repetitive, up to 80% of which are negative. Statistics alone and hearing that should show you, whoa, let me pay attention to how I'm thinking. No wonder I'm stuck in this negative thought loop spiral. This is a common thing many people deal with. Let me start to reprogram my subconscious mind. Let me work on my thought patterns, because that's going to enable me to really go after and achieve my goals or my visions.
Yeah, Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself, one of his books, has been transformational for me. It really opened my eyes on why my body felt the way that it felt the whole time. The whole healing thing, whether it's just from uh, a breakup. I went through a divorce after 9 years together. I guess been year and a half now. Yeah, close to 2 years now. Anyway, it took me a while. For me, I completely isolated myself and said, okay, I need to really heal, and I need to understand exactly everything. And as you said, it was very painful, very uncomfortable, and many times you don't, for any challenges you face, you need to take it day by day. It's the same. It's just like you don't even, I couldn't even see the light at the end of the tunnel, and to me, it was like I don't even know how I did it way back until now, because also I was in the depression. But it is possible. You just need to be patient, and it's not going to be easy, that's for
Yeah.
sure.
So a couple of things
Uh-huh.
here is one of my favorite authors, Michael A. Singer, The Untethered
Mhm.
Soul. For anyone who hasn't read that book completely changed my life and got me through some really difficult moments. And I reread it as much as possible. And he talks about when situations happen, that when things that happen that don't go our way, it's like this thorn gets pushed into us. And we're walking around with all these thorns because we haven't done the work to pull these thorns out. And so when you don't do the work to pull them out, they will just keep getting pushed deeper in. And so this is why it's so important to like take that time to heal and to understand what happened and to really work on yourself, because otherwise you're walking around like, I hope this person doesn't say that, or I'm afraid of this thing happening, and these thorns just keep getting pushed deeper in, and it's so uncomfortable and it's painful. Whereas you really need to work on healing and pulling that thorn out of you and understanding, why does this keep upsetting me? Because I believe no one can make you feel a certain way. Like, it goes back to relationship with self, and you letting someone else's beliefs or words or actions influence like how you feel about yourself. Sure, I think feedback is so important, and like, but when you're being your authentic self and you're living in alignment with who that is, and your intentions are good, like, and you have done the work to heal, you shouldn't be having these thorns poked deeper and deeper in.
I feel like, yes, you can choose. I think in life it's all about, it's always a choice. You can choose to let another person make you feel in a certain way. The problem with that is that now you lose your freedom, because now you're relying on that person to feel a certain way. The day that the person is no longer there, or the day that the person no longer gives you what you need, you can lose yourself just because you were addicted to that. So yes, it all depends how you feel about yourself. And I feel that nowadays, for some reason, more and more people are struggling with that. It's kind of sad, and you see a lot of toxicity all around. It's just a bunch of people who haven't been able to take the time and really heal. But this it's tough. It's tough. I just hear from friends and some other people, and and I try to just help them out. But as you said, if people don't want to be helped and people don't want to change, then what else can you do?
And I think the more, like podcasting feels like a little bit of therapy because we're able to have these really deep conversations and share our views and our experiences. And the more that I like partake in this like media world, like and when I see, as I study psychology, I realize like those who are hurting are the ones who are hurting others. Like hurt people hurt people. And so it's not like my viewpoint is not what's wrong with this person who's being so mean and causing all these other people pain. It's what happened to this person. That person is suffering. That's why they're lashing out at others. That's why they're not excited for you or happy or supportive of you. So sometimes we're seeking validation from these people who aren't capable of giving it because they've been through something that's really affected them and they're not able to show up in that way. And so I think to really understand that has been really helpful.
And having empathy is one of the biggest things that we need more of nowadays. And I totally agree with you. I've seen people every time that you see somebody losing their shit on social media, just being a hater or just having just hateful comments, or even somebody insulting you in traffic, something like that. It's like they're probably in such amount of pain, and that's the only way that they can so channel it and just process it. But one thing I started realize or start applying to my life or just doing more, and it was after I went through my depression, is having empathy even for those who show some level of happiness. And in what way? When I was deep in a deep depression, I used to work out with a group of people, outdoor workout, and for that hour, I was a total different person. I was just wearing a facade. I was just like joking around, having a good time. But then I was in hell at home. I was in so much pain, and every time I see somebody, that made me realize if nobody can see how I truly feel, I wonder how many people do the same thing. It's not that they pretend to be happy, but then they just have this image of themselves, not wanting to be vulnerable, not wanting to ruin the mood, not wanting to bring other people down and make them feel like awkward. Like, well, I don't know how to feel because you feel, sad. It's like we tend to overlook those who seem cheerful and happy when in reality they can be dealing with their own demons as well.
We're all going through something that like no one knows about for sure. And so I think it's so hard. Like you see someone's like public persona or social media, like glorified highlight reel, and you're like, wow, their life looks so perfect. They're happy all the time. Look at everything's picture perfect. But like you never know what's going on. And so I'm with you to have empathy. And just to another thing that's really helpful for those who feel stuck or having a hard time is to start to instill a gratitude practice in your life. So every night, something I do, I mean, I wake up and say thank you and enter my meditation and have this morning routine. So I start in my day with intention, but my evening, I do a gratitude journal and I write down at least 3 things that happened that day that I'm grateful for. And this could be like, oh, the sun shining. Oh, I saw a beautiful flower. I had a home cooked meal. I smiled at my friend, or like, you know what I mean? Like, it doesn't have to be this huge, grand thing. But what I really believe is when you start to show appreciation and gratitude for what you do have, you're given more to be grateful for.
Yeah, that is something that I always heard that, and to me was silly, and to me made no sense whatsoever. To me, it's like, okay, what I can be, thankful for. Sure, I have a roof. Uh, you know, I can eat, I can run, fine. But and I never felt anything different. And I would try for 2 or 3 days, whatever. And then later in life, I realized it's just a muscle. It's a practice that it's just trying to tap into get your body get used to that feeling of gratitude, and it's not going to happen overnight. It's not that the first time you say it to yourself or in front of the mirror or you write it down, you're going to feel it. You're going to feel silly, but then you need to keep doing it.
Keep doing it. And I mean, this conversation just leads me to say, like, we're talking about being stuck. We're talking to people who are struggling. Like, I don't wish an easy life for anyone, because my most difficult moments have really like helped me develop my character and like my how I'm able to show up and what I've learned and like how I can help others. And so those challenging moments have like defined me the most. And so, I for those who never experience the struggle, you'll never feel how good the wins are because you've never experienced the low point of that. And so, for those who are resisting the challenges or resisting a difficult time, push through it. You're going to come out the other side. Nothing lasts forever. And like do the things that enable you to keep going and trust that the sun will shine again. And I love this reference in regard to how I think of like when we're having negative thoughts, to think of our mind as like a blue sky. And these thoughts are like clouds on a stormy day. They don't last forever. Let them pass by. Don't get too attached.
Yeah, it's that polarity in life. Like, in
Mhm.
order for you to feel love, you need to feel loss or pain, or if you want to feel, or if you want to enjoy success, you need to experience failure. So
Mhm.
you need both. In order for you
Yeah.
to really appreciate one, you need to experience the other one, and you cannot have one without the other one. But it's hard because even though we can be addicted to our own suffering, our bodies are always going to try to avoid pain
Mhm.
by any means. And that even just taking a leap of faith and just starting
Mhm.
your own business, or just getting to a new relationship, or leaving a relationship, right? Anything that forces you to take a step into the unknown and to be uncertain of what's going to happen brings pain. And you kind of need to experience it if you want to experience
Yeah.
the good things.
And it doesn't even have to always be pain. We're hardwired to avoid like things we're afraid of. And so as a protection mechanism. And so just to like dance a little bit with fear, because it gets easier when you start taking bold, messy action, is what I like to call it. My word for 2024 is action. And it gets easier when you keep doing things you're afraid of and you keep stepping into the unknown, because that's where change and transformation really lies, is by doing things that are new to you, that are different. And that's how you actually improve and get good at something, is by repetition, practice of doing something new.
Yeah, I struggled with that for many years. I used to be controlled by fear, and fear holds so many people back. It is crazy. And once you start doing it, you realize that you suffer way more in your head than in reality. But we
Yeah.
cannot see it until you actually take the step and do it.
hmm Exactly. Like I like to look at it like, okay, we're standing at letter A. If we never go to B, we'll never find out what's at C. You know what I mean? So like as I said with the people, places, and things, if you don't take the bold step, if you don't make the phone call, if you don't send the email, you'll never know what's on the other side of that. And so it's all this untapped potential that's just waiting for you to tap into when you get to dance a little bit with fear. And like, what's the worst that can happen? If you're really afraid of something, ask yourself, what's the worst that can happen if I take this action? Oftentimes it's like not that big of a deal.
It is not. It's not a big of a deal, and yet, and this is something that at least with me has been a challenge, because I can think about the worst case scenario, which is not bad at all, and yet I cannot calm down my nervous system and still have to do it anyway. And only with enough repetition I can just calm down my nervous system. But that, I think, nothing is harder than the first step. Just
Yes,
starting, that's the hardest one.
it
And
is.
once you do it, okay, now we are getting some momentum, but you
The
need to start
momentum.
some
Yeah,
and, and you need to start somewhere.
you
And you need
have
to start
to.
somewhere.
You have to start. We all have these dreams and these goals, and we're just the time, time isn't slowing down. So let's start saying some action. Let's start going after it. Dance with fear. I'm here to support you if you need help taking that action step. So is Daniel. I know with this podcasting thing, like it's so easy to compare yourself who has done it, who's an expert, who's done it for 5, 10, 15 years. Go back to their first episode. Go back to where they were, 10, 20 years ago. And like the only reason they are where they are today is because they started. That's it.
Yeah, I mean, and if you and as we mentioned, we live in autopilot, and next thing you know, and you turn around, it's like 30 years just passed, 40 years just passed, and then
Yeah.
where did time go? And it's a very a cliche phrase that people never regret about things that they did do, but the things that they didn't. So I'm trying to tell that to myself now because there are things that clearly I'm not doing because of fear. So
Yeah.
it's a reminder for myself as well. It's a reminder
Good.
for so
Good.
so Laura, I've been enjoying this conversation a lot. We touch a lot of very cool things. But as a closing question, what is something that you're proud of that most people don't know about?
That's a good question. Okay, I wanted to do like two things. I mean, the thing that I'm most proud of, and it really relates to our conversation. It's my ability and determination to keep getting knocked up after being brought to my knees, and to not let and to keep getting back up with an open mind and an open heart, because so often we can get closed up. We're fearful, we're scared, we don't want to move forward, we've been knocked down. But to get back up and really open your heart back up again and open your mind and to keep going. And so I've now completely used my adversity, which was horse accident, coma, traumatic brain injury, into my advantage to now where I can help others who are struggling or who have limiting beliefs or limiting opinions about their future, and use those into their advantage, to where I've now done the TEDx experience, where I've launched the podcast. I'm going to graduate with a master's in psychology, and I can really understand the science of human behavior and what an event like that, having a traumatic brain injury, can do to your brain and your potential. And so I am proud of where I stand today, because I've consistently pursued my dreams, my goals, my vision, despite limiting beliefs that have been placed on me or that I've had at times on myself. So that's my answer.
Beautiful. I love it. Lauren Fields, everybody. Lauren,
Uh,
where can people find you if they want to work with you, listen to your podcast, follow you along?
sure. So I use Instagram the most, and it's my name, Lauren Fields. You can listen to the Fieldswell podcast on all major streaming platforms, or you can visit my website, fieldswell.com.
Excellent. Excellent. I'll add those to the YouTube description, show notes. Yeah, they're going to be on the video as well. Lauren, once again, it was a total pleasure talking to you. Such a enjoyable conversation about all aspects of the mindset, feelings, emotions, and all of that.
Oh, thank you, Daniel. Daniel, I really appreciate it. Thank you for having me today.